Hello. Hi. So I've been talking to people a lot lately about creativity and innovation as dual sides of one coin. One is to wonder and one is to invent. I've also been talking a lot about creative practice and neuroplasticity and youth development. And it's probably because the metacognition, I like words like that, basically what it means to create is something that we've been investigating in our work with middle school and high school students at Caldera, the social impact organization that Jay mentioned where I work. We are helping young learners to see the function of creativity in developing agency and voice and confidence. And then we're inspiring them, hopefully, to develop those tools to call upon as ritual. I'm a performer, so that echo, can you hear the beat ringing? Is it because I'm too close to something? Okay, great. Okay, so agency, voice, and confidence, right? And we're trying to inspire them to develop it as a practice, as a ritual, and as a habit, so that they can call upon it in their everyday life, especially after they've graduated from Caldera. So, how does that all connect to what I'm talking to you today? Well, last week, or rather maybe 2 weeks ago now, my family and I flew just a little bit of ways away to Bozeman, Montana, on our way to what used to be called Wonderland. Does anyone know what used to be called Wonderland? Yellowstone National Park. It was established in 1872 as the first public land set aside from settlers and poachers and developers for the public benefit and enjoyment of the people. And at one point during this trip, one of my 8-year-olds said, "I'm having a good time except for all of this driving. Why do we have to drive so far just to see a waterfall, Mom?" And it reminded me of my own first time at Yellowstone, where I kept asking my dad how long it was going to take until Old Faithful. And that was in the mid-1970s. And maybe there weren't as many people as we saw on June 5th this year. And maybe there were a lot of people, but in my memory, it was just Dad and I standing there waiting for Old Faithful to erupt. And that is how memory works. And that is how we create the stories of our lives. I only remembered the frustration and the exhaustion and the complaining when my own children reminded me of it. But prior to that, my memory was just of Old Faithful and my dad and bubbling clay and the moment that it finally burst from the ground. And that is the power of storytelling, of image and of word. So I also have no recollection, for example, of seeing a mountain lion really close up, nor do I remember if it was even in the same trip to Yellowstone. However, somehow that story of my dad taking a picture of me looking at a mountain lion, the cub, it wasn't a big mountain lion, it was just a little baby cub, while my mom said, "Oh, Claude, just don't take the picture, don't worry about it, just grab her." So much of that story has been retold that it became family folklore. So much so that every time I saw the photo during the regular family slideshows, how many of you remember from the 70s, those little slide decks that were like round? Yes, that's exactly, we would sit down and we'd watch our slides of Yellowstone. And it became part of my personal narrative. Maybe the mountain lion cub was on that same trip, maybe it wasn't, but the image of the place and the proximity of the wildlife was the same. Our brains, as I'm coming to understand it as I work with young people, are intricate and they're complicated and they're complex. And we create narrative in order to anchor ourselves in our reality, and we create narrative or music or poetry in order to disrupt our regular neural pathways. It's called making space. How many of you are familiar with like AI and artificial intelligence? Okay, a lot of you. I'm in Wilsonville, of course. So yes, AI world has this concept called the overfitted brain. And some of you may have heard of this term, It means basically that the brains of organisms similarly face the challenge of fitting too well into their daily distribution of stimuli, which causes overfitting or poor generalization. So by hallucinating out of distribution sensory stimulation every night, also known as dreaming, the brain is able to rescue this generalizational ability of its perceptual and cognitive abilities and basically increase task performance. Another way of saying that is when we disrupt the regular pathways of the day-to-day with things like a vacation to Yellowstone, then we are allowing something new to be created. That is why we commemorate important dates like this with storytelling and celebration. When I told the story of Juneteenth to our twin sons, I concluded by saying, in my mind, I imagined that all of the enslaved people who heard the proclamation from those Union soldiers on that day, 2.5 years after President Lincoln had proclaimed it, threw down their hoes and baskets filled with cotton and lived happily ever after. That is the power of narrative. Because we all know that it wasn't that simple. So how we tell and retell stories of the past determines how we will relate to our experiences in the present and in the future. And knowing how all of the stories of the past are unique and different and intricately linked gives us access to empathy. Because it is human nature to hear a story and to try to put ourselves into that narrative, we suddenly have an experience of the other person, their struggles, and their joy. For example, and I even hesitate to say this, but I consider myself a patriot. And the reason I hesitate to say this is because it has become a very complicated word. And yet I believe strongly in the Constitution, and even more strongly in the Founding Fathers' struggle with the Constitution from the very beginning. During my undergraduate studies, I majored in political economic history, as Jay said. It was an honors interdisciplinary course of study where I got my bachelor's degree. And I spent a lot of time studying 4 key areas in American history, or key periods of time, and the political economic implications. So the building of the nation immediately following the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, Reconstruction, and the Civil Rights Movement. And during that first period, the building of a nation, the Federalist Papers gave us the opportunity to sort of peek into the continuation of the living and breathing principles of freedom as it was laid out by the Founding Fathers in real time. If you remember those papers from history class, then you'll know that the Founding Fathers were struggling with how are they interpreting the very Constitution that they had laid out. And the very ideas that the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence celebrated, freedom, or rather liberty, are the very principles that enabled Abraham Lincoln many years later to proclaim emancipation of enslaved Americans. That is why I call myself a patriot. And it is also these very ideals and interpretation of them through constitutional law and other, blah, blah, blah kind of things, right? Blah, 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 blah. But nevertheless, are those kinds of interpretations continue to enable us as a people, we the people, to continue to evolve the way we interpret those ideals. And we can only do it with civic responsibility if we know where we came from, if we know the stories of our past. And I underlined this, if only we celebrate our differences rather than letting our differences pull us apart, as they did in that great war, the last one that was fought on American soil. And when I use the word great, I mean because it was epic, not because it was wonderful. We don't all have to like each other. We don't have to like each other's stories. In fact, our stories are all different, as I've already said. My visual interpretation of that Juneteenth morning that freed enslaved people in Texas is a childlike hopefulness, because the rest of the story we know That journey to freedom and liberty and the pursuit of happiness continues to this day for the ancestors of those recently freed enslaved people on that late spring, almost summer morning. Even the fact that it was morning is something I decided, that only good news can come in the morning. Perhaps it was the end of a long day. We do not know. Or maybe we do, and I just don't remember reading it in the history book. When we honor each other's stories, when we truly listen to stories that are different from our own, it is a kind of out of distribution sensory stimulation, like a dream. It is a disruption. And now our brain is instinctively set upon a course of inquiry and curiosity. As it becomes more plastic in order to receive the new information, thereby creating a new version of the narrative that fits the circumstances of the telling and the hearing. For, at the end of the day, creativity is simply a disruption. It is an act of experiencing or thinking something new, maybe an idea or a story or a piece of art or a bridge, if you're an engineer, or a speech. When we listen to each other and take in our different experiences through story, through music, through art, it gives us that neuroplasticity to honor and uphold the unalienable rights to be free, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, I'm not here to make a political speech. I am here, however, to celebrate a memory so powerful and so strong that it has been celebrated by African American communities across the nation, not just in Texas, since that moment on June 19th, 1865. And that memory, which is so powerful that finally, in 2021, became a federally recognized holiday. I'm here also to talk about how creativity was a driving force in making this new nation when it was new. And that creativity was the catalyst for Abraham Lincoln's words. I'm going to say that one again. That creativity was the catalyst for Abraham Lincoln's words that emancipated 5 generations of enslaved people in the United States, creating a new situation based on upholding the ideals of a document written by dreamers. And just like a dream or a memory, the amalgamation of those ideas and the thoughts and facts and figures and all the data and all the images and the sounds and the smells and all of the stories, they get rolled up together in a little package that you can come to as an individual at any time as you move through this world, creating the stories of your life. Because ultimately, we are all creative people, though by 4th grade, most of you decided that you were not. And yet, your life has taken a certain path because it tells a story of who you believe yourself to be or who you still want to become. I started out wanting to create. My own personal mission was to inspire and support young people to awaken the potential of their creative voice. And after a series of what appeared to be random jobs and impactful life tours, I arrived exactly where I wanted to be, inspiring and supporting young people by awakening the potential of their creative voice. Now, the story of those detours, or rather the winding road of my own personal life journey, is really a story for another time if you have like a couple of hours and a glass of Chardonnay. But I want to say today is that we may not all create art, though we praise those who do, because it makes our lives so much more beautiful and thought-provoking and understandable. So even if we do not create art, we all are creative. Think about it. Think about all the work that you put into arriving at this moment in your life. Think of the stories you tell about why you choose and are choosing to commemorate Juneteenth this year in this place with these people, most of whom you do not even know. Do you recognize the out-of-distribution sensory stimulation of coming to a public event on a complicated holiday? Do you intuitively feel the value of being here as a creative act, of opening your mind to something new, or reflecting on a memory of ancestors from generations past? Doesn't it make you wonder? And even if you don't think you're creative, all of those of you who say, no, I like math and science or engineering or technology, even in those disciplines, you are trying to solve a problem for humanity. I mean, we need to get across that body of water, so let's build a bridge, or a rowboat, as one of my twins might say. And for those of you who do call yourselves creative or artists, you are trying to understand humanity. When I am sad because I can't get across that body of water, what does that look like? What does it feel like? How does it sound? How might I conceptualize a sunrise over that body of water and the glorious feeling of newness that it brings me? And even that there is understanding and there is trying to solve problems seems so binary, when in fact, creative practice is an amalgamation of all of these. Creativity is the fluidness between your left brain and your right brain. It is your whole brain, in fact. It is the moment of wonder, and it is the moment of invention, and everything that comes in between and before and after. And dare I say that I believe that is why you are all here today, and of course, whatever food smells really good. You are looking to understand humanity, and you know the power of civic engagement and hands-on interactive community building and performance and presentation to transform the world. And I share all of this with you today because as a theater artist, the tools of my craft are to use word and movement and sound to share a narrative, to create a memory which is an echo of a story that is already inside of you. So, how will you commemorate this holiday? How will you remember this time that you spent in a regular creative practice of curiosity in community? What story will you tell about Juneteenth and what it means to you? Think about all the images you have in your mind about American history. Think of the knowledge you now hold about Juneteenth, or maybe you've already held it and you're reholding it. Think of all the people you have met along your life journey who have inspired you through the sharing of their story. Put all of that into memory, for it is in fact the past, and this moment right now is the future. So hopefully, our twins will remember the waterfall at the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone and not the hour-long journey that it took to get there, just as I remember my dad's hand when a geyser erupted right in front of me. And hopefully they will remember the joy and the delight when they first heard me tell the story of Juneteenth, with enslaved people throwing down their farm tools and riding off into the sunset. And hopefully they will be curious to learn more about their ancestors and the struggle that happened along the way from that day until today that led to the resilience and the beauty that is African American culture. And may the echo of this story that resonates inside each of you, whether you are African American or not, be an experience that disrupts your overfitted brain and intricately links in your mind all the beauty of this community, this place, and your experience of the awe and wonder of hearing the story of someone who is not you. Thank you.
so much.